The man who never blinked at exit 91. I want to start by saying that I am not a superstitious man. I have been driving long haul for 22 years, and in that time I have developed a philosophy about the road that is essentially practical. The road does what it does, the weather does what it does, the other drivers do what they do. And your job is to respond correctly to all of it without getting killed. There is no room in this philosophy for superstition, and I have always been comfortable with that. That was before exit 91. It was late April, a Tuesday, and I was southbound on a state highway in rural Tennessee. Good weather, clear road, light traffic. I had 4 hours to my delivery window and plenty of fuel, and I was running well ahead of schedule, which is the best feeling there is in this job. The kind of night where you put on a country station and you let the miles unspool and you feel, for a little while, like the road belongs to you. I saw the man at approximately 1:15 am. He was standing on the shoulder of the highway at the exit 91 ramp. Not near the ramp, not on the ramp, on the shoulder of the main highway, 2 or 3 feet from the fog line. He was tall, wearing dark pants and a gray button-down shirt that seemed insufficient for the April night temperature, which was around 50 degrees. He was standing very straight, facing the road, one arm raised slightly at his side but not extended, not hitchhiking, just standing. Something about the posture made me pull over. I rolled down the passenger window and called across. "Everything okay? You need help?" He walked to my passenger door and looked up at me. He was perhaps 50, lean-faced, dark hair with some gray in it, very ordinary features. I remember thinking there was nothing remarkable about him, and then immediately thinking that thought again, twice in rapid succession, like my brain was trying to confirm something. "I've been waiting," he said. "For what?" I asked. "You need a tow? You broke down somewhere?" "I've been waiting," he said again. Same words, same inflection, as if he had a limited script and was working through it. "For a ride?" I asked. "Where are you headed?" He looked at me, and here is where I need to be precise, because the precise thing is the thing that matters. He was looking directly at me, and he did not blink. I am aware that people don't blink constantly, that there are gaps between blinks that can last several seconds. I am aware that in a brief interaction you might not notice whether someone blinks or not. I am not saying he blinked rarely or infrequently. He did not blink, at all, for the entire duration of what followed. I offered him a ride. I still cannot fully explain why, given that everything about him was generating the low, steady alarm that I have come to trust over 22 years behind the wheel. I think it was the temperature, 50 degrees in a dress shirt, standing on a highway shoulder in the middle of the night, no vehicle visible anywhere, that convinced me there was a practical emergency I was responsible for addressing. He climbed into the passenger seat. We drove. I asked him where he was headed, and he said south, which we were. I asked him how long he had been on the highway, and he said for a while. I asked if he had a phone, and he said it didn't work here. I asked his name, and there was a pause of perhaps 4 seconds before he said Martin. And the pause was wrong. Not the pause of someone deciding whether to give their real name, but the pause of someone retrieving a word from a filing system that required more search time than it should. He sat with his hands on his knees, and he looked at the road ahead, and he did not blink. I watched him in my peripheral vision. This is something you get good at after 22 years. Peripheral observation, taking in information without appearing to look. In 15 minutes of driving, I watched for a blink. I counted instead of watching the mile markers. Nothing. At the 20-minute mark, I could no longer maintain the fiction that this was normal. My hands were tight on the wheel, and my heart rate was elevated, and the rational part of my brain was still presenting explanations. Medical condition, Bell's palsy, some neurological thing that affected the blink reflex, while the other part, the older part, was insisting that I needed to stop the truck. I pulled into a gas station. I told him I needed fuel. He said nothing. I got out. I walked around the truck, slowly, giving myself time to think. When I came back to the passenger side and looked through the window, he was sitting exactly as I had left him, hands on knees, eyes forward, not blinking. I went inside the station. I told the attendant, a young woman who was reading a textbook behind the counter, that there was a man in my truck who I was concerned about. I described the situation. She looked past me through the window at the passenger side of the cab. "Sir," she said slowly, "there's nobody in your truck." I looked. The passenger seat was empty. The door was closed. Nothing was disturbed. I went back out and opened the passenger door. The seat was empty. No warmth on the seat that I could detect. No impression in the fabric. I asked the attendant if she had seen anyone get out. She said she had been watching and no one had exited the vehicle. I drove south for 3 more hours and I delivered my load and I did not stop. I have been back to exit 91 4 times since then, always in daylight. There is nothing remarkable about it. A standard highway ramp, a shoulder, a guardrail. Normal, unremarkable, but I have heard from 2 other drivers who work that corridor that they have also seen a man at exit 91 in the small hours of the morning. Tall, gray button-down shirt, standing very straight. Neither of them stopped. Both of them said the same thing, independently, without prompting. There was something wrong with his eyes. I did not tell them what was wrong. I wanted to see what they said on their own. They both said the same word. Still, his eyes were too still. 2. I followed a convoy that didn't exist on GPS. I have driven with convoys before. It's a common enough practice on long night hauls, a loose, informal grouping of trucks running the same direction, close enough to communicate on the CB, far enough apart to be safe. There's a comfort in it, especially on the empty stretches where you can go 30 miles without seeing another vehicle. Company. The sense of not being entirely alone on the road. So when I came up on the convoy at 1:40, I'm on I-76 in western Nebraska, I did not question it. 4 trucks ahead of me, evenly spaced, all running about 65 miles per hour, all with the particular red and amber light cluster of standard semi-rigs. I eased in behind the last one, settled to their speed, and felt the familiar comfort of not being the only thing on the road. I keyed my CB on channel 19. "Evening, fellas. Any of you running east to the split?" No answer. I tried again. Nothing. Drivers sometimes run with their CB off, especially late, so I didn't press it. About 20 minutes in, I checked my GPS. Waze, which I run alongside my truck's navigation. It shows other vehicle positions when there's signal, though signal out here was patchy. The trucks were not on the screen. This alone meant nothing. GPS vehicle tracking requires specific systems, and not all commercial trucks participate in real-time position sharing. What made me look twice was the traffic layer. Waze shows traffic density as a color overlay, and on the stretch of I-76 I was driving, the traffic layer showed my vehicle and essentially nothing else. No density. No cluster of vehicles ahead of me, as if the 4 trucks I was following didn't exist to any system that wasn't my own eyes. I had a Dashcam, standard forward-facing unit, recording continuously. I made a mental note to check the footage later. We drove. 2 hours, approximately. I say approximately because the time did something strange around the 2 a.m. mark. I noticed at one point that my clock read 2:14, and then I looked again and it read 2:09, and I am not a man prone to misreading digital clocks. I attributed it to tiredness and the strangeness that a dark highway in Nebraska at 2 a.m. produces in the human mind. The trucks maintained their spacing. Exactly maintained it. I sped up to see what the last one would do. 80 miles per hour, then 85. The truck ahead of me sped up at the same rate, maintaining the gap precisely. I slowed to 60. It slowed to 60. The gap never changed by more than a truck length. I tried the CB again on every channel. Nothing from any of the 4. At approximately 3:30 a.m., I stopped for fuel at a station in Kearney. I pulled off, and the convoy continued. I watched all 4 trucks pass the exit without slowing, and disappear east into the dark. I asked the fuel station attendant if he had seen a convoy of 4 trucks come through. He said he hadn't seen a single truck in the last 2 hours. The highway had been dead all night. I checked my dashcam footage in the parking lot. The footage showed my truck, my headlights, the highway ahead, mile markers passing, 2 hours of I-76 in the dark, no trucks. In 2 hours of footage, on a road where I had been following 4 trucks close enough to read their mudflap clearances, the dashcam showed an empty highway. I sat with this for a while. I am not a man who reaches quickly for extraordinary explanations. I went through the ordinary ones. Dashcam malfunction, camera angle missing the trucks, some kind of optical issue with the recording. I reviewed the footage twice. The camera was working perfectly. It recorded a bird that crossed low in front of my headlights around mile 214. It recorded the glow of my instrument panel. It recorded everything that was there. The trucks were not there. The camera confirmed they were not there. But I was following them. I matched their speed. I saw them change lanes twice when a slower vehicle merged. I saw one of them activate its left running lights briefly, a signal or a malfunction, and then go dark again. I have no explanation. I have talked to one other driver who describes following a convoy on I-76 that he later discovered had no GPS presence and left no record on his dashcam. His convoy was 5 trucks. Mine was 4. He told me his drove east until they reached a bridge overpass near Grand Island and simply were not there when he came out the other side. Like the bridge had taken them somewhere the highway didn't go. I didn't reach that bridge. I stopped for fuel first. I have wondered, more than once, what would have happened if I had followed them all the way. I have not managed to decide whether I'm glad I stopped. 3. The motel room was waiting for me. I want to be precise about the timeline, because the timeline is the thing that makes this impossible. I first stayed at the Harlan Road Motor Inn in October 4 years ago. It is a small independent motel on a state highway outside of Macon, Georgia. 12 rooms, a vending machine that works intermittently, a front office run by a man named Gerald who watches basketball on a small television and seems mildly surprised each time a guest appears. The kind of motel that survives because it is cheap, and it is there, and sometimes cheap, and there is exactly what you need. Gerald gave me room 13. I didn't ask about the number. He handed me the key, an actual metal key, not a card, and told me checkout was at 11 and there was ice at the end of the row. Room 13 was clean. Bed was adequate. I slept 6 hours and left. I thought nothing of it. I came back 3 months later on a different route that happened to need an overnight near Macon. Gerald looked up from his basketball game and said, without looking at the reservation book, room 13 is ready for you. I assumed he remembered me. 3 months was not so long, and I am a physically distinctive person. 6'4", red beard going gray, a particular way of moving that my wife describes as deliberate. I thanked him and went to room 13. The door was unlocked. I stood outside it for a moment, key in hand, and then I tried the handle and it turned. The room was clean, the bed was made, the lights were off, as if it had been prepared and then left waiting. I asked Gerald about it in the morning. He said he always left room 13 unlocked when he knew a guest was coming. I pointed out that he hadn't known I was coming. I hadn't made a reservation. He looked at me blankly and said he had a reservation under my name. I asked to see the book. My name was there, written in Gerald's handwriting. No check-in date, no credit card information, just my name on the line for room 13, as if it had been written as a standing entry rather than a specific booking. I told him I hadn't made a reservation. He considered this and said that sometimes people call ahead and don't remember doing it, and that I should get some rest. The third time was 6 months later. I had genuinely tried to avoid the Harlan Road Motor Inn, not from fear exactly, but from the unease of the second stay, the unlocked door, and the name in the book. But I was 4 hours past my delivery, more tired than I should have pushed through, and the alternatives in that stretch were 40 minutes further on in either direction. I pulled in. Gerald looked up from his television. Room 13, he said, before I reached the counter. Not a question. How did you know I was coming? I asked. He looked at me with the patient expression of a man who has been asked a question he considers obvious. Your name's been in the book since Tuesday, he said. I assumed you'd come when you needed to. I checked in on Thursday. He had written my name on Tuesday, 2 days before I arrived, for a stay I hadn't planned and a route I hadn't determined until that morning. The room was unlocked. The bedside table had a glass of water on it, tap water. Nothing unusual, but I hadn't ordered it and Gerald didn't do turn-down service. I have stayed at the Harlan Road Motor Inn 11 times over 4 years. Every time my name is already in the book. Every time room 13 is unlocked. Once the television was already on a channel I would have chosen. Once the curtains were already adjusted to the angle I prefer. Once, and this is the one I think about most, there was a paperback book on the bedside table. A Western novel by an author I like, that I had been meaning to buy for months and hadn't yet. I asked Gerald directly, on my 9th stay, how he knew when I was coming. I asked it plainly, without softening it, because I had run out of patience for dancing around it. He thought about this for a long time. Then he said, Room 13 knows when it needs to be ready. I asked him what that meant. He turned back to his basketball game. Some rooms just do, he said. I stopped asking why years ago. I have not stopped asking why. I have no answer. I have no theory that doesn't require accepting something about that room, about whatever is in that room, that I am not prepared to accept on the available evidence. What I know is this: 11 times, the room was ready. 11 times, my name was already written. 11 times, something in or about room 13 at the Harlan Road Motor Inn knew I was coming before I did. I have one more delivery next month that routes me through Macon. I know, already, where I'll be sleeping. And somewhere in a ledger in a small front office off a Georgia State Highway, my name is already written in for that night. I wonder what will be waiting on the bedside table. 4. The passenger only appeared in my dashcam. I review my dashcam footage every week. This is a habit I developed after a claim dispute 4 years ago. A four-wheeler cut me off, then claimed I had followed too closely, and the footage cleared me within an hour. Since then, I check the footage every Sunday, methodically, skimming through the week's recordings at 4 times speed and flagging anything that needs documentation. The Sunday I found the footage of the passenger, I was 12 minutes into that routine. I had done a long haul that Thursday, north on I-35 through Iowa into Minnesota. 11 hours, overnight rest in a truck stop outside of Albert Lea, then south again Friday. Standard, nothing unusual had happened, or so I believed. The passenger appears at the 4-hour and 17-minute mark of Thursday's recording. There is nothing leading up to it. The previous frame, and I have checked this many times, running the footage back and forward in single frame steps, shows an empty passenger seat, as it had been for the entire preceding 4 hours and 17 minutes. Then the next frame shows someone sitting there. He is male. That is the most I can say with confidence. He is wearing something dark, a jacket or heavy shirt, and he is sitting normally, facing forward, hands in his lap. The dashcam is forward-facing, and the passenger seat is at the edge of the frame, so the view of him is partial, right shoulder, part of a jaw, an ear, the side of a head. Enough to establish that there is a person sitting in the passenger seat. Not enough to identify him. He is in every frame for the next 3 hours and 41 minutes. 3 hours and 41 minutes. I was driving. I was alone in the cab. I am completely certain of this. I had left Albert Lea alone. I arrived in my final destination alone, and no door opened in that footage for the entire duration of the recording. The interior cab audio track, which my system captures, includes no conversation, no rustling, nothing that suggests another person was present. But the footage shows him sitting there for 3 hours and 41 minutes, and then in a single frame he is gone, and the passenger seat is empty again for the remaining 40 minutes of the recording. I watched this footage 6 times on that Sunday. Then I called my son, who is studying computer science and knows about video editing and image artifacts. He came over, and we watched it together. He spent 2 hours going over the footage frame by frame, checking for artifacts, compression errors, anything that could produce the appearance of a figure that wasn't there. He found nothing. The figure, he told me carefully, has consistent pixel values across frames, responds correctly to the light changes as we passed under highway lights, and shows no compression artifacts that would indicate it was a digital edition or a camera malfunction. Whatever is in that seat in those frames was physically there to be recorded. "Dad," my son said, eventually, "I don't know what this is." I asked him what it looked like to him. He was quiet for a moment. "It looks like someone who didn't want you to see them," he said. But the camera did. I have not been able to improve on that description. I went back over my memory of that drive. 11 hours, most of it routine. I had stopped twice, once for fuel, once for a rest area bathroom break. Both times I had been out of the cab for less than 10 minutes. Both stops appear on the footage and show the cab empty while I was out. The figure is not present at either stop. He appears in a single frame transition at the 4-hour 17-minute mark of continuous driving and disappears at the 7-hour 58-minute mark. 8 minutes before I arrived at my destination. He was there for the majority of the drive. He was there while I talked to myself, which I do on long hauls, a habit I've had for 20 years. He was there while I sang along badly to a Merle Haggard record. He was there while I ate a gas station sandwich at mile 230. I do not know who he was. I do not know what he wanted. I do not know if he heard any of it. I have reviewed every week's footage since. The passenger seat is always empty. But I look at it differently now. I look at it the way you look at a corner of a room after you've once found something in it that shouldn't have been there. Even when it's empty, you're aware of what the empty is covering. My son has not come back to look at the footage again. He told me he prefers not to think about it. I understand that preference. I have not yet managed to adopt it. 5. Dispatch told me never to mention Route 44. It was my 3rd week at the company when Jerry Falk pulled me aside in the depot yard and gave me what he called the only advice that actually mattered. Jerry had been with the company for 19 years. He was the kind of driver whose opinion other drivers quote. When Jerry said something about the road, you wrote it down. "Don't take Route 44, he said. "The state highway? What's wrong with it?" "Nothing wrong with the road," he said. "Nothing wrong with the road at all. The problem is what happens on the radio when you drive it alone." I waited. "I'm not going to tell you more than that," he said, "because the drivers who've told more than that have had more trouble afterward. Just don't drive it. There are always alternate routes." He walked away, and that was the end of it. I spent the next 3 weeks asking other veteran drivers about Route 44. The results were consistent in their inconsistency. Every driver over 10 years with the company either refused to discuss it or claimed not to know what I was talking about in a way that made clear they knew exactly what I was talking about. Nobody explained. Nobody elaborated. I am a stubborn man. I am aware of this. It is not always an asset. I took Route 44 on a Wednesday night in February, alone, eastbound, a routine load to a distribution center 60 miles away. For the first 22 miles, nothing happened. The radio played normally. CB was quiet, no traffic, which was typical for that road at that hour. I had my truck's radio on a country station out of the nearest city, which faded in and out as I got further into the rural stretch. At mile 23, the country station cut out. Static, then, on the static, a voice. I want to be very precise about this. I have thought carefully about how to describe what I heard, and I keep returning to the same description. It was a voice the way a recording is a voice. The words were correct. The inflection was approximately right. But behind it was the quality of something that had learned to make these sounds rather than something for whom the sounds were natural. The voice said my name. Not my handle, not my company name, my actual name, first and last. The name that appears on my license and my employment file, and nowhere in my truck. The voice said my name, and then it said, "You were told not to come here." I did not respond. I turned off the truck radio. The voice continued. "You were told," it said. "But you came anyway." I turned off the CB. The voice continued. Not from the CB, not from the truck radio, from the cab itself. Or from the air inside the cab. From no specific source I could identify. Quiet and even and carrying that quality of imitation that was somehow more frightening than anything hostile would have been. "There is a weight to curiosity," it said. "People forget that. They think wanting to know a thing is without cost." I drove. I did not pull over. I did not engage. I have thought about this choice many times, and I believe it was correct. Something about the voice communicated clearly that engagement was what it wanted, and that denying it engagement was the only leverage I had. "You'll come back," the voice said. "They all say they won't. They all come back." Mile 31. Mile 32. "There are things on this road that have been here longer than the road," the voice said. "Longer than any of the names people have given this land." Mile 37. The voice stopped. Clean cut mid-sentence. It had been saying something about the difference between knowing and understanding, and then it was gone. The way a light goes when you throw a switch, without any decay or trailing edge. The radio static continued for another moment and then resolved back into the faint country station, which played the end of a song I didn't recognize, and then went to a commercial. I completed my delivery. I drove back on the alternate route. I told Jerry the next morning. He listened to all of it without expression. "Does it happen to everyone?" I asked. "Everyone who drives it alone?" "Everyone who drives it alone at night," he said. "Daytime seems to be fine." "What is it?" He looked at me for a long time. "I don't know what it is," he said. "I know what it says. And I know that the drivers who keep driving Route 44 after the first time," he stopped. "What happens to them?" I asked. "They stop talking about it," Jerry said. "All of a sudden, they just don't want to discuss it anymore, and they start taking Route 44 regular, for every run that allows it, like they want to be on that road." He looked at me with an expression I could not read entirely, but that contained something that might have been pity. "Like something on that road wants them on it," he said. And eventually they agreed. I take the alternate route now. I have for 2 years, but I still hear it sometimes, in the static between radio stations on a quiet night. My name. In that voice that learned how to sound like speaking. Just my name. And then silence. 6. Something was knocking under my truck. I am going to tell you exactly what I heard, because the exactness matters. It was not a random sound. It was not the irregular knocking of a loose heat shield or a dragging chain or road debris caught against the undercarriage. I know all of those sounds, and I can identify each of them the way a mechanic identifies an engine knock. By rhythm, by location, by quality. I have been driving long enough that my truck communicates to me through sound in a language I read without thinking. What I heard at the Sweetwater Rest area at 2:30 a.m. on a July night was none of those things. It was a knock. A deliberate knock. The rhythm of a human hand on a door, 3 beats, pause. 3 beats, pause, repeated at the same interval, from directly beneath the rear axle of my trailer. I had pulled in an hour before for a mandatory rest. The rest area was not busy. 3 other trucks, widely spaced, all dark. I had eaten, done my pre-sleep walk around, confirmed the lot was clear, and gone into my sleeper. I fell asleep. The knocking woke me. 3 beats. Pause. 3 beats. Pause. I lay in my bunk and I listened to it for what I estimate was 2 full minutes. I wanted to establish the pattern before I moved, because pattern tells you things. A random sound might be mechanical. A pattern is something else. The pattern did not vary. Same interval. Same force, not loud, not aggressive. The moderate pressure of a knuckle on wood, except against metal trailer undercarriage, which turned it into something that resonated through the frame and into the cab. I got up. I got dressed. I took my flashlight. I want to be clear about what I was thinking as I did this. I was thinking there was a person under my truck, a person in distress, or a person attempting to break into my trailer from below, or a transient who had made shelter under the low clearance of the trailer and was trapped. These are all things that have happened to drivers. I was not thinking about anything else. I went outside. The rest area was quiet. The 3 other trucks showed no lights, no movement. The overhead lights of the rest area illuminated the lot evenly, and I could see clearly. I went to the rear of my trailer and crouched down with my flashlight. Nothing under the trailer. I walked the length of it, shining the light from every angle. No person, no animal, no object, nothing that could have made that sound. The knocking had stopped when I opened the cab door. I checked the undercarriage carefully. No loose components. No debris caught against anything. No heat shield partially detached. I went over every point where a mechanical knock could originate and found nothing. I stood up. I stood in the rest area parking lot at 2:35 a.m. and I listened. At 2:36, the knocking resumed. 3 beats. Pause. 3 beats. I was standing 4 feet from the rear axle. I crouched immediately. Flashlight on the undercarriage. Nothing there. The sound continued. Below me, close, clearly from the space beneath the trailer, and there was nothing in that space to produce it. I straightened up. The knocking continued. I put my hand flat against the trailer floor, the exterior underside, and felt the vibration of it. Conducted through the metal, real, physical, produced by impact. There was nothing impacting it. I stood there for 3 minutes and 40 seconds with my hand on the trailer and the knocking continuing beneath me, trying to reconcile what my ears and my hand were telling me with what my eyes were showing me, and I was unable to. Then it stopped. Final knock, 3 beats, and silence. Complete, I did not sleep again that night. I sat in the driver's seat until it was light enough that I felt comfortable, and then I finished my mandated rest time reading a paperback I had in the door pocket. In the morning, in daylight, I checked the undercarriage again. Nothing. I had the truck inspected at a shop 40 miles up the road because I trust my instincts, but I also trust mechanics. They found nothing. No loose components, no wear patterns consistent with the kind of impact that would produce that sound. Nothing. I have told this story to 4 other drivers. 2 of them looked at me steadily and said nothing for a moment. Then one said, "Sweetwater rest area? July?" I said yes. He said he had heard something similar the previous summer. He would not elaborate beyond that. He just said, "I don't stop there anymore. I have not stopped at Sweetwater since." Whatever was under my truck that night, it knew how to knock. It knew the cadence. It knew how hard to knock to be heard without being loud. It knew how to ask to be let in. I did not let it in. I am grateful, on the long dark halls, for that one good decision. 7. The rest area closed 15 years ago. The rest area appeared on my right at 11:20 p.m., exactly where my 15-year-old atlas said it would be. I have a thing about paper atlases. I carry one in addition to GPS, because I have been burned too many times by GPs routing me into situations a paper map would have prevented. Old information is sometimes better than no information. The atlas said, rest area, mile 188. And there it was. It was a standard highway rest area. A long, low building in the middle, brick construction, brown paint, separate entrances for men and women on either side. Vending machines visible through the glass entrance doors. A covered picnic area to the east. The parking lot accommodating perhaps 20 vehicles, with a dedicated truck and RV section set apart from passenger car spaces. And it was busy. Not crowded, but alive. 7 or 8 other trucks in the truck section. A handful of passenger vehicles, people moving between the parking area and the building. A family at one of the picnic tables, despite the hour. The lights in the building were bright and functional. I pulled in. I used the facilities, which were clean and fully stocked. I bought a water from the vending machine. I struck up a brief conversation with another driver at the sink, a heavy-set man named Darrell from Louisiana who was heading north. We talked about weather and road conditions for about 5 minutes. He had a Louisiana state ball cap and a wedding ring and opinions about the road construction on I-55 that were specific and informed. I went to my sleeper. I slept 7 hours. When I left in the morning, it was fully light, and the rest area was still there and still functioning. A few vehicles in the lot, the building open. I thought nothing of it. 2 nights later, returning west on the same route, I looked for the rest area at mile 188. The exit sign was there. I took it. The ramp curved down. The parking lot was cracked and weed-grown, the asphalt buckled by years of frost heave and neglect. The building was intact, but its windows were boarded. The doors were padlocked with chains that had weathered to a dark rust. The covered picnic area had lost 2 of its 4 support posts, and the roof had partially collapsed. A sign on the padlocked door read, "Closed, State Highway Maintenance." Below that, almost illegible from sun fading, "Facility permanently closed 2009. I walked the parking lot. The weeds were established, not recent growth, not seasonal overgrowth, but the deep-rooted multi-year vegetation that takes hold when a surface has been untrafficked for a long time. Years of growth, not weeks. I looked up the rest area when I reached a town with decent signal. It had been closed in 2009, as the sign said, due to state budget cuts. Several regional news articles confirmed it. Photographs from a local transportation blog showed the building boarded up and the lot overgrown. The photographs were from 2011, 15 years ago. I had walked into that building. I had used the restroom. I had bought a water. I still had the plastic bottle in my cup holder, half empty, no label, which I had assumed was a generic store brand. I had talked to Darrell from Louisiana about road construction on I-55. I have thought about Darrell. I have thought about him specifically and extensively. He seemed real in every way. The weight of his presence in the room, the sound of his voice, the Louisiana accent, the specific and slightly irritated opinions about I-55 construction. He recommended a truck stop in Sikeston that he said had the best catfish in Missouri. I had written down the name. I called that truck stop. It exists. They serve catfish. The woman who answered the phone said they'd been doing it for 30 years. This proves nothing. I know this proves nothing, but I keep thinking about where Darrell was sleeping that night. Whether he pulled into a rest area on his way north and found it full and comfortable and real and slept 7 hours in his bunk. Whether someone found, 15 years later, a record that it had been closed since 2009. Whether he is telling someone right now about a trucker he met at a rest area, who had opinions about GPS, who bought a water from a vending machine, who slept through till morning and drove away. Whether we are both, in some sense, still there. 8. I delivered a package that was already open. The seal was intact. I want to establish this first because it is the fact that makes everything else impossible, and I need you to understand the impossibility before I tell you what I found. The seal number was 774291B. I had recorded it at the shipper in Columbus at 6 p.m., written in my logbook, photographed on my phone, confirmed against the manifest. The seal was a standard tamper-evident plastic tag, the kind that can only be removed by cutting and that shows clear evidence of tampering if any force is applied. I have used these seals for 12 years. I know what an intact one looks like, and I know what a tampered one looks like. When I backed into the dock at the Cincinnati Distribution Center at 11:30 p.m., I walked the rear of the trailer as I always do, and checked the seal before opening the doors. Seal 774291B. Intact, no cuts, no stress marks, no evidence of tampering. I removed it with my cutters, recorded the removal in my logbook, and opened the trailer doors. The smell reached me before the lights inside the dock fully illuminated the trailer. I have tried to describe this smell, and I keep arriving at the same inadequate words: old paper, and something underneath it that was organic, and I did not want to identify further. Not a spoilage smell, the trailer was not a refrigerated unit, and the load was dry goods, packaged food products. It was more like the smell of a place that has been closed for a long time and opened all at once. The dock workers arrived behind me, and I heard one of them say something under his breath. Every box in the trailer had been opened. Not every other box, not some boxes near the doors that might have shifted and failed. Every box in the trailer, the entire load, 47 pallets of boxed food products, had been opened. The cardboard flaps were folded back or torn. The interior packaging was visible, and the contents of each box had been arranged. This is the part that I struggle to write down, because writing it down requires committing to having seen it, and part of me has spent the months since trying to give myself an out. But I saw what I saw. The contents of each box had been arranged. Not scattered, not disturbed in the manner of someone searching for something. Arranged. Cans placed in patterns, packages stacked in configurations that were not random. The dock workers moved through the trailer slowly, looking at it, and no one spoke for almost a minute. "What is this?" The dock supervisor said finally. I had no answer. She called her regional manager. The regional manager called my company. There were several phone calls and a great deal of documentation. An investigator came and photographed everything. No one could explain how the contents had been arranged without the seal being cut. The investigator examined the seal housing, the door hinges, the door seals, the trailer floor, the roof. No points of entry. The trailer was intact. The investigator asked me if I had stopped anywhere unusual. I told him about 2 fuel stops and 1 way station. He noted them down. He asked if I had noticed anything during the drive, sounds from the trailer, movement, anything. I told him no. This was almost true. Around mile 120, about 3 hours into the run, I had thought I heard something from the trailer. A faint sound, rhythmic, that I had attributed to cargo shifting. I had checked my mirrors, the trailer looked normal, and dismissed it. I did not mention this to the investigator. I know I should have. But I had dismissed it at the time, and I could not reconstruct whether it was real or a tired driver's auditory hallucination, and I did not want to complicate an already complicated situation with something I couldn't confirm. The cargo was a complete loss. The arrangements, whatever they were, had involved physically moving and handling the products in ways that contaminated them for distribution. The investigation closed as inconclusive. Unknown cause. No explanation for how the seal remained intact while the interior of the trailer was accessed. I have thought about the arrangements, about the patterns the cans were placed in. Some of the dock workers tried to describe them to the investigator and struggled. Words like symmetrical and deliberate kept coming up. But no one could agree on whether the patterns meant anything or were simply the product of something moving through the load without purpose. I keep thinking about what has enough time and darkness to open 47 pallets of cargo, arrange the contents, and reseal itself into a locked trailer before the doors open. I keep thinking about what would want to. The answer I keep arriving at is something that was there before I opened the doors. Something that had been in that trailer the whole time, waiting for me to let it out. 9. The truck in my mirrors was getting closer. Without moving, I first noticed it at mile marker 204. Black semi, standard configuration, running lights only, no headlights, which should have been illegal, and which I noted with the automatic irritation of a driver who follows the rules. It was behind me by perhaps a quarter mile, close enough to be clearly visible in my mirrors, far enough that I could not make out any markings or company logos. I noted it and moved on. Traffic behind you is not a phenomenon. You share the road. What I noticed at mile 218 was that it was closer. Not dramatically closer, maybe 200 yards instead of 400. I might have attributed this to normal variation in speeds, except that I had been running a consistent 67 miles per hour for the past 14 miles, and the truck behind me appeared to be running the same speed. Not gaining, not losing, just maintaining at a distance that was shorter than it had been. I increased to 72. I watched my mirror. 5 miles later at 2:23, the truck was approximately 150 yards back. Closer again. Still maintaining, not accelerating, not surging forward, just present at a new, shorter distance, as if the gap had been quietly revised downward while I wasn't watching. I went to 78. At mile 231, it was 100 yards back. I was watching carefully now. I was watching with the specific attention of a driver who has identified something wrong and is working out what it is. I watched for a full 5 minutes, my eyes cycling between the road ahead and the mirror. In those 5 minutes, the black truck did not visibly move, did not surge, did not close the gap in any motion I could see. It simply maintained. At the end of 5 minutes, it was 75 yards back. I went to 82 miles per hour, which was reckless and which I am not proud of. I held it for 3 miles. At mile 237, it was 50 yards back. The math was wrong. The math was not just wrong. It was impossible. I was pulling away at highway speed and the gap was closing. Not because the truck behind me was faster, I could see it in the mirror and it was not moving relative to the road markings. It was simply closer. As if the space between us was being consumed without either vehicle moving through it. I called my dispatcher on the Bluetooth. I told her there was a vehicle behind me behaving strangely. She asked what I meant. I tried to explain. She asked if it was following me aggressively, if I felt threatened, if I needed her to call highway patrol. I said, "It's not moving. But it keeps getting closer." She didn't respond for a moment. I looked in the mirror. 30 yards. I hit the brakes. Not a full stop. A hard reduction. Dropping from 82 to 45 in about 10 seconds. The kind of brake that would, if someone were actually following too closely, result in a collision. The black truck did not brake. It did not swerve. It did not hit me. At 45 miles per hour, the mirror showed it 20 yards back. At 45. After I had dropped 40 miles per hour of speed. "Are you okay?" my dispatcher was asking. 20 yards became 15. I floored it. Everything the engine had. I got to 91 before I pulled my foot back, some rational part of my brain noting that 91 miles per hour in a loaded semi on a dark highway was how people died. I looked in the mirror. The black truck was behind me. 100 yards. 200. As I watched, it settled at approximately a quarter mile, where it had been at the very beginning, at mile marker 204. As if nothing had happened. As if it had simply reset. I did not brake again. I drove to the next interchange, took an exit, pulled into a gas station lot, and sat with the engine running and every light in the cab on for 20 minutes. No black truck came down the ramp. I took a different highway to my destination. I arrived late, but I arrived. I filed a report with my company documenting the incident. I described the truck and the behavior. The safety coordinator called me back the next day and said there was no record of any incidents on that stretch of highway that night. No other drivers reporting unusual vehicles, and that my description of the truck's behavior was, her word, inconsistent with known traffic phenomena. I told her I was aware of that. She asked if I had slept adequately before the run. I told her I had. She noted it as driver-reported anomaly, unconfirmed, and closed the report. I have thought about that quarter mile. The initial distance. How it always came back to exactly that. Quarter mile, one lane, running lights only in the dark. I have thought about what it wanted, whether it was testing something. Whether the closing distance was a demonstration, or a warning, or simply what it does, moving through space by different rules than the ones I know. I have thought about what would have happened if I hadn't taken that exit. If I had stayed on the highway and let the distance between us continue to shrink. Whether 15 yards would have become 10. Whether 10 would have become 5. Whether 5 yards would have become nothing at all. I am glad I don't know the answer. I check my mirrors more than I used to. I check them at mile 204 every time I pass it, which is twice a month on this route. The road behind me is always empty. But I drive that stretch at 80 miles per hour now, and I don't let myself wonder why.